How's it going, YouTube? It's MechRed2 here. We're going to be reviewing Leftist Gender Ideology is Nonsense by the Daily Wire. This is going to be take two on this reaction. I only got a couple of minutes in, so I haven't seen the whole video. But I had some audio issues, so we're going to restart the recording here. So let's try this again.
Early cancellation. We're going to be canceling everybody on the left celebrating the Kamala Harris VP pick because they can't celebrate it. It doesn't make sense for them to celebrate it.
You're right, it doesn't make sense for the left to celebrate it, and that's why the left isn't celebrating it. The left is not celebrating, well, the actual left is not celebrating Kamala Harris's nomination because of her history with law enforcement. The fact that she celebrated locking up thousands of people for marijuana usage, laughed at the concept of legalized marijuana, and the things that she said about both Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden during the primaries. The left does not look at things through the lens of woman good, woman of color good, person of color good. They also look at their political leanings and their political ideologies. The left won't celebrate a terrible person just because they're a woman or just because they're a person of color or both. The actual leftists are not celebrating Kamala Harris's nomination. Democrats may be, because it's a woman and a woman of color that's being nominated as vice president. And I know she's not old enough, but the left would actually be a lot happier with AOC being nominated than Kamala Harris.
But you see, this is a common problem. One of the most prominent characteristics of leftists in modern America is their complete inability or unwillingness to apply their principles consistently, especially in their personal lives. Now, you see stark illustrations of this.
So before I'll let him get into it, I'm going to let you know. Oh, you're not even watching the video, damn it. I'm going to let you know that the next couple of minutes are going to be just a bunch of straw man stacked on top of one another. And you can basically ignore just about everything that he has to say here, because it's all bullshit. But I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to pick up on that pretty easily.
This problem provided, for example, by the climate alarmist who warns of an impending apocalypse but still maintains a 401k.
See, there's the first one. People like myself that recognize that there is a climate crisis going on right now because of what we see in our day-to-day lives, not just that, but because of the plurality of data and the scientific consensus concerning climate change and what's actually happening on our planet. There's nothing wrong with both acknowledging that there's something going on with our climate that needs to be addressed while simultaneously planning for your future, because leftists like myself plan on doing something about that. And his idea that having a 401k invalidates your opinions on climate science because you think the world is going to end. We don't believe the world is going to end because we want to do something about it. But two, 401ks are kind of a joke. They're going to be completely worthless by the time people in my age bracket and younger reach retirement age. But yeah, this is the hypocrisy of the left straw man. There's going to be a couple more of them.
The pro-abortion zealots who congratulates a pregnant woman despite believing her to be infested by a subhuman parasite. Of course, they're
so that's bullshit as well. Leftists and pro-choice advocates don't believe that an egg that has been freshly fertilized is a full-blown human being. If a woman can't financially, emotionally, or physically support that child, or simply doesn't want that child, she should have the right to bodily autonomy and have the right to not have to carry that child to term and raise that child. That doesn't mean that every single pregnancy is viewed through that lens. When my wife became pregnant, even though we're both pro-choice, we were both incredibly excited because it's something that we wanted. There's a difference between a wanted and planned pregnancy and an unwanted pregnancy or a dangerous pregnancy that needs to be terminated. And there are plenty of tragic situations where a pregnancy is wanted and they're wanting to bring a child into the world, but the child is either unhealthy and won't make it to term, or won't survive very long after birth, or the mother wouldn't survive the pregnancy or childbirth, and she would end up dying in childbirth or before then, and the pregnancy needs to be terminated. Hello, mate. Do you know the difference between Britain and the UK and the 4 countries in it? Vaguely, though I'm not a Brit bonger. I mostly concern myself with American politics. But yes, I vaguely understand the difference between the United Kingdom and Britain. But that's not what this video is about.
There are also the well-worn examples of the socialist tweeting about the pitfalls of capitalism on his iPhone.
Yes, I noticed you criticize society, yet you exist inside of it. Is this the straw man that they love to throw out? You can have an iPhone and still criticize capitalism. There's nothing. There's no ideological problem with consumption under capitalism while still acknowledging and identifying the problems with capitalism and the damage that it's causing to our society. There's nothing wrong with that. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism, and in a capitalist society, you're going to need things that are created by that capitalist system to exist in it, because that's the only option we have at the moment.
The progressive politician preaching about the evils of guns while flanked by a squadron of armed security.
So looking at the political spectrum, and I know I said this in the last take, and this is about where we got to before I was made aware by my lovely wife that my microphone was fucking up again, which is why my last 2 videos couldn't go up on YouTube. But the current modern political spectrum goes from far left to far right, and there's only a very small portion of the political spectrum that is actually those gun-grabbing liberals that the right loves to demonize and paint the entire left side of the political spectrum with. Basically, left of center and centrist and all the way right are very pro-gun. Then there's that small portion left of center that is your Pete Buttigieg types and that other Democratic nominee during the primaries that was saying, hell yeah, we're coming for your AR-15, we're coming for your AK-47. The gun grabbers that they're so worried about make up a very small portion of the left side of the political spectrum. But a very common phrase on our side is, if you go far enough left, you get your guns back. You have people that are farther left than that, like myself, socialists and communists that believe that people should be armed in case there is a need to defend yourself, be it from an oppressive government or from the right-wing nut jobs that believe that everybody that doesn't believe exactly the way they do should be killed. And then there are people that are further left than me that believe that bloody revolution is inevitable and we need to prepare for it, because the only way for the proletariat to gain the means of production is to rise up and seize it through bloody revolution. I don't advocate for that. I believe that it's perfectly attainable through legislation by moving further and further left with our elected officials. That is predicated on the idea that our votes still mean something, which under the current administration, they are trying their best to ensure that that's no longer a thing. But no, there's only a small portion of the left that doesn't like guns and wants to take them away. And of course, those politicians are going to have an armed guard with them, regardless of your political ideology. If you're a public figure, if you're a politician, you're going to need an armed guard service around you, because there are people in our society that would seek to do you harm. And for the gun-grabbing liberals, like they like to point out, they're definitely going to need armed guards, because there are nut jobs, there are smooth-brain crazies on the right that would take their guns and kill them to try and protect their right to bear arms that they're so convinced is under assault. Despite the fact that it most certainly isn't, and your guns aren't going anywhere, they would try to take action and do political violence against these politicians. So of course they're going to have an armed guard retinue. That's just part of being a public figure. There are musicians that have armed guards. So of course politicians are going to have that. There is no hypocrisy in this. Because those gun-grabbing liberals believe that guns are important, but only certain people should have them, which would be law enforcement and the military. and the people that would be guarding them are law enforcement. There is no hypocrisy there. I disagree with the removal of guns and gun ownership, but I digress.
All of that. It seems that, if not for cognitive dissonance, many on the left would not have any cognition at all. Nowhere is this dynamic more obvious and glaring than in the arena of gender. Leftist gender ideology contradicts itself in so many places that you feel yourself nearly going insane just trying to make sense of all of it. And I think that's by design, by the way.
No. If you understand modern gender theory and gender ideology, it makes perfect sense. The fact that you don't understand it is not a problem for us. The fact that we understand the bimodal distribution of gender identity, and we also understand the complexities and the variation in human sexuality is not a problem for us because we understand it. You don't, which is why it doesn't make any sense to you, because you refuse to do any research into the topic. But because just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that it's invalid or is a problem for us.
It's not one coherent theory, but a chaotic web of declarations and doctrines, each asserting itself without any apparent awareness of the.
There are a lot of topics on the issue of gender ideology and gender theory and sexuality, but they all interconnect and intersect in a way that brings it all together and creates quite a lot of cohesion. This, again, leads back to the problem of you don't understand it, and because you don't understand it, you think it's scary. It's not scary if you know what you're talking about, if you know what is being said in academia. Do some research and you'd be able to understand it better.
The others, one example at random. We're told that...
At random. I totally think this is random. I'm 100% convinced that this is just a random factoid that he just came up with off the top and wasn't totally planned.
Sexual orientation is immutable, cannot be changed, right? We're all...
No. Well, that's not entirely true. You are born with your sexual orientation. The fact that it may take you some time to figure out what that is doesn't invalidate the existence of a sexual orientation. Who is this guy? I'm not quite sure who this person is directly. I guess his name is Matt Walsh, but he works for Ben Shapiro on the Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro's media outlet that he created, or was created for him, and he was put in as the figurehead. Anyway, I look at gender ideology or gender orientation, excuse me, through the lens of academia, but it also took me personally a long time actually, most of my life, to actually realize what my sexual orientation was. I was raised in a very fundamentalist Christian household and was told that straight was the only way to go and everything else was an abomination, and I spent a lot of my life denying my sexual orientation. And it wasn't only in the last few years that I actually acknowledged and accepted the fact that I was bisexual, perhaps pansexual, I don't know. But I don't find penises gross, even though I have one. It took me a long time to come to terms with that, mostly because of my upbringing. So for the vast majority of my life, I viewed myself and called myself straight, even though that wasn't true because I was in such deep denial because of my upbringing. The fact that it may take time for a person to come to terms with and fully realize their sexual orientation does not invalidate its existence, and it doesn't make it fluid and changing. It's not changing. It doesn't change. It's the way you were born and the way your brain is wired. It just may take you some time to realize that, either because of personal issues, not quite understanding it, or societal pressures, like in my case. But it doesn't invalidate it.
Also told that gender is fluid and can easily be changed. These two things cannot be true.
Yes, they can. Your gender identity can change based on how you identify. You could have been born a cis man, or that's a wrong way to phrase it. You could have been assigned male at birth, and then later on in life, come to the realization that you actually identify as a woman. And when you figure that out, you then are a woman. A woman is someone who identifies as a woman. And there are people that consider themselves gender fluid. That falls perfectly in line with the bimodal distribution of gender, as is currently understood by academia. So yes, it does make sense, and it is not irreconcilable with modern gender theory.
At the same time, if a gay man decides to identify as a woman, then either we must say that he is no longer gay since he's now a woman attracted to a man, or he is not actually a woman.
No, a gay man that realizes that he identifies as a woman, but continues to have sex with cis men, yeah, sure, she may no longer be gay in the traditional colloquial sense, but she would have always been a woman. It just took them realizing that they were a woman to realize that fact, and the fact that they're still attracted to cis men, or at least people with penises, or people who identify as men, depending on how their sexuality ends up working out for themselves personally. That is not invalidated by the fact that they transition and now identify as a woman. It's not hard to understand these concepts if you know what you're talking about and actually do a little bit of research.
If he's no longer gay, then sexual orientation can be changed. If he's not actually a woman, then gender...
No, sexual orientation cannot be changed. They're still attracted to the same gender, or at least the same primary sexual characteristics that they always were. It was that they realized that they were a woman. Their sexuality didn't change, just the label on it did.
...is not fluid. See, there are only three options here. Either sexual orientation cannot be changed, and neither can gender, or...
See, this is a false dichotomy here. He's setting up two options that you have to pick from, which are both wrong. I guess he's going to set up three, but in any case, he's giving you two false options that are both wrong, is what a false dichotomy is. And if you can't choose between two wrong options, then you're just wrong as a person. But everything that he's going to say is completely incorrect.
Sexual orientation can be changed, and so can gender, or sexual orientation can be changed, but gender cannot be changed. Any of those are logic.
You see, he left out the fourth option, where your gender and your gender identity can change over time, but your sexual orientation does not. You may realize later in life that you are attracted to more types of people than you originally thought, but that was always a part of you. It just took you time to realize that. You can change your gender. You can go from identifying as a man to identifying as a woman, and still be attracted to men, in which case, while you identified as a man and went by he, him pronouns, you would be considered gay. But after you transition to a woman, or go by she, her pronouns, or they, them, but still remain attracted to people with penises, you may not be considered gay anymore, but your sexual attraction didn't change. Just the label associated with it did. It's not that hard, dude. Come on.
Logically possible, though only one is scientifically and factually correct.
I don't know why he thinks people's gender identities are his business. Exactly true. Thank you. The way people identify with their gender or their sexuality, it doesn't fucking affect you. So I don't know why people like him are so fucking worried about it. It doesn't affect you. Just because somebody may have a penis but considers themselves a woman, feels that they're a woman, identifies as a woman, and is a woman, the fact that they have a penis has no effect on your life. Even if you find yourself attracted to somebody that has a penis, if you can't reconcile that, and you can't find yourself attracted to somebody with a penis, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not bigoted to feel that way, and it won't work out between the two of you. There are a lot of reasons why people aren't compatible in a relationship. Genitalia may be one of them, but that's only one facet of why a relationship may not be compatible. I don't understand why people like this are so hyper-focused on what's inside of people's pants and how they personally believe and identify as people, even though it has no bearing on their life. if somebody comes into the men's restroom, because I'm cis and I use the men's restroom. If somebody comes into the men's restroom and has to sit down to pee, I don't care. I sit down to pee because it's easier to hold your phone and it doesn't fall in the toilet. I mean, if there's a urinal, I'll use it, sure. But if somebody has to sit down to pee and can't use the urinal, that doesn't affect me. I mean, I guess the only way it could affect me is if I have to take a shit and there's only one stall and they have to use it to pee and they're currently peeing. I have to wait. That is literally the only way that could impact my life. But people like this are so obsessed with what's in other people's pants and the way other people believe. It's mind-boggling. Especially when they belong to the party that also simultaneously believes that if you don't like guns, just don't buy them, and that other people's beliefs shouldn't impact your life. If somebody is a Muslim or a Hindu or a Sikh or basically isn't a Christian, that their beliefs should not be used to legislate them, but have no problem using their personal beliefs to legislate other people.
But the theory that sexual orientation is immutable while gender is fluid is a logical impossibility.
No, it's not. You just have no fucking clue what you're talking about because you don't understand it.
Somebody making such a claim might as well defend the inherent roundness of rectangles or the fundamental dryness of water.
Really stupid straw man, I guess. You're just really smooth-brained, dude. You're just really dumb.
It is logically contradictory. It cannot be true. The leftist confusion about gender and about what their own view on the subject is supposed to be has been especially on display ever since Joe Biden, of course, announced Kamala Harris, like we talked about, as his pick for vice president.
No, it hasn't.
There are other, funny and hypocritical things about the pick, too, of course, such as the fact that Harris will now be working under and subordinate to a man that she tearfully denounced as a racist not even a year ago.
Oh my God, they were competing against each other in a political race, so she had to smear him. Though I do disagree with the use of smear campaigns in political playing fields. I do understand their efficacy and why they're used, but they were competing against each other for a nomination for the Democratic Party. They're going to use every weapon in their arsenal, and if appealing to people, to woke, scold, and reactionaries' ideas of racism or perceived racism or gender ideology and the lack of nuance that some people on the left side of the political spectrum have about those concepts, they're going to use it. They were competing against one another. Yeah, they talked shit. That's what happens. Just like during the 2016 election, when President Trump talked a lot of shit about Ted Cruz and his other competitors. And then as soon as President Trump got the nomination, those other competitors immediately started working for him and endorsing him and helping him fundraise. That's just what happens.
But the greater point is that the media's ecstatic reaction to a woman VP pick is belied by the rather serious problem that women don't technically exist, according to leftist ideology.
No, women do exist. A woman is somebody who identifies as a woman. You're talking out your ass because you're trying to own the libs and make them look bad by either deliberately or genuinely not understanding what they're talking about because you refuse to look into it.
According to them, the word woman has no discernible meaning.
No, it does.
A woman is not necessarily a person with XX chromosomes and female reproductive organs.
That's true.
A woman is not defined by anything physical, nor neurological, nor psychological, nor behavioral.
It's psychological. It's how you identify. It's not physical characteristics. You're right. It's not neurological necessarily, though. I don't remember exactly the source on this, but there is a medical consensus that states that the brain of a trans woman, the brain activity of a trans woman, is more similar to that of a cis woman than that of a cis man. So you're wrong there.
Woman is not defined by anything.
You're wrong.
Which is to say that a woman isn't anything in particular. Woman
You're wrong.
by the light of the left's philosophy is an arbitrary concept. It has no substance. It is not objective.
I think I need to speed this video up because if I keep having to respond to each ignorant thing that he says, I'm going to keep repeating myself the same way I am now. He's just re-saying the same ignorant shit over and over again.
It can mean anything and be anyone. If you think I'm overstating the case here, then just approach any leftist currently extolling the woman vice presidential nominee and simply ask them what they mean when they say woman. They will not be able to answer the question.
I can answer the question, and I have several times. A woman is somebody who identifies as a woman. A woman could be somebody with a penis. A woman could be somebody with a vagina. A woman could be somebody who's flat-chested. A woman could be somebody who has big old milkers. It doesn't matter what their physical characteristics are. All that matters is how they identify. A woman is somebody who identifies as a woman. That's it. It's a very simple answer. It's just hard for people like him to accept because he doesn't agree with it. It is how he's been conditioned. I firmly believe that to be a conservative, you have to be conditioned to believe that way and to have a certain level of cognitive dissonance to be a conservative, to be able to reject reality as much as they do.
They cannot define the word, and I mean literally cannot. Their ideology won't allow it. Now, if you do pose this question, the eternal question that I have been posing to leftists for years now, the most likely response will be a deflection, accusing you of being a transphobe or whatever. But
nope.
No, of course, not actually answering the question. You may, however, be presented with some kind of attempt at an answer. So let's go through a couple. Here's a common one, one that I've heard many times. A woman is an adult human female, which, yes, this part is correct. This is the actual answer. You win the prize. Congratulations. Adult human female. That's what a woman is. But then they'll continue. An adult human female or anyone who identifies as an adult human female.
See, the second half is the actual answer. It's somebody who identifies as a woman. I'm repeating myself. Jesus.
Now our coherent and correct definition has been thrown into chaos. Because this definition is just another way of saying that a woman is an adult human female or not an adult human female. Woman has no definition if that is a definition. A thing cannot be what it is and also what it isn't.
No, you just don't like the definition.
This is like saying that a tree is a tree or anything that looks like a tree. So a drawing of a tree actually isn't a drawing of a tree because it is the thing that it's a drawing of?
I mean, if you really want to get super hyper specific about it, a drawing of a tree, as long as it takes place on paper, could, I guess, be considered a tree. But no, trees don't think, at least as far as we understand. Trees don't have feelings. Trees don't have emotions. Trees don't have a higher brain function because they don't have a brain. Trees can't identify as somebody. This is like just as stupid as Ben Shapiro's got you during that one viral clip where somebody is debating him on transgender ideology, and he's like, well, if I say that I'm a moose, then why am I not a moose? A moose is not a human being. A moose can't identify as a human because it doesn't have the higher enough brain function to do so. Same thing with trees. A trans woman is not saying they identify as something that is not human and not sentient. A trans woman is saying that they identify as a woman. That's perfectly rational and perfectly backed up by medical science. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean that it's not true. Just because you don't like the definition doesn't mean that the definition's invalid.
That makes no sense. A similar problem for people who say trans women are women. Okay, then why do you call them trans? What does the trans part denote? Is there, in fact, some notable difference between trans women and non-trans women? If so,
it's because they were assigned male at birth and have at least pre-surgical transition have primary male sex organs. But they are women. They're just trans women because we for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why, and I'm sure there's an explanation out there, denote the difference between a cis woman and a trans woman. It probably has to do with intersectionality and the oppression that trans people specifically face in our society. But yes, there's a differentiation in verbiage about it, but it doesn't make them any less of a woman.
Then the two groups are fundamentally different. But if you say they are not fundamentally different, then it doesn't make any sense to differentiate them the way that you already do in the way that you refer to them. So none of this makes any sense.
You see, in casual conversation, we don't. If somebody tells me that their pronouns are she, her, then I'm just going to refer to them as a woman and as her. If I'm at a restaurant and they're already at the table and I walk into the restaurant and let's say I'm having a meeting with them or whatever, and I have to identify them to the waiter, I would say that woman over there. I'm dining with her. I'm not going to say I'm dining with that trans woman over there. In normal conversation, at least generally, when we're not discussing gender ideology and gender identity, the fact that somebody is trans doesn't usually come up. It only comes up when you're discussing those topics. Otherwise, they're a woman. It's people like you that constantly have to put that qualifier in there. I don't know if you do it just to trigger the libs or whatever, or if you just it's a compulsion that you can't get away from. But in casual conversation, it doesn't come up. It's only when you're discussing the topic specifically.
Might also be told that words like woman and man are on a spectrum. Okay, then tell me about this spectrum. What is on either side of this spectrum? Define the people who exist on the extreme ends of the woman side and the man side. If someone is on the spectrum between man and woman, what does that mean? Between what and
The intersex or gender fluid. There isn't a gender binary. It exists on a bimodal distribution. I'm going to take a page out of Vash's book here, and we're going to do a paint stream. Isn't that fun? So I got my paint here. So we've got, let's go for blue for boy. We got boys over here. Let's make that a little bit bigger. We got boys over here. I'll go pink. We got girls over here. And we'll do red for the line. So the bimodal distribution of gender looks a little bit like this. Let me go ahead and turn chat off so that you can see the screen. You've got your hyper-masculine, testosterone-infused men and people who identify as men over here. And then as it goes up, you've got the majority of men who identify as men, the majority of cis men who present with predominantly male characteristics, square jaw, facial hair, big swing and donger, testicles, things like that, dense bones and broad shoulders. And as it comes down, fewer and fewer people, as you move closer to the middle, have less and less stereotypically or less pronounced traditionally male characteristics, such as myself. I've got a baby face. I have moderately broad shoulders, but I'm not overly muscular, and I don't build muscle as readily as some other men that I know. And I'm a little bit effeminate, I suppose. And it comes down in the middle here, where you have intersex people and people that don't necessarily identify with one gender, non-binary people. Excuse me. This is a very simplistic and simplified explanation for it, but I think it's easily digestible. But you have intersex and non-binary people in the middle, and not a lot of people, as compared to the general population, fall into this section, which is why the line's all the way down here. But it's not zero. And then as we move towards female, you have women and people who identify as a woman, and people who are born female that are less feminine than your traditional female, than the traditional idea of what it means to be feminine. And it goes up to the majority of women and people who identify as a woman that are traditionally feminine, and have traditionally feminine characteristics. And then it comes back down over here on the other side of hyper feminine women that are like the apex of femininity, and everything that goes along with identifying as female. So this is the bimodal distribution of gender identity. You've got your hypermasculine boys, and then your average Joe. Then you've got more feminine male characteristics until you come down to the non-binary intersex portion of the distribution, and then it goes up to the traditional female, the less feminine female identifying people, then your traditionally female identifying people, and then your hyper female identifying people. This is the bimodal distribution of gender identity, which most everybody on the right doesn't understand, because they still believe in the gender binary when it's actually a bimodal distribution.
what? So you can't escape the definition problem by talking about spectrums. If the spectrum takes us from one undefinable thing to another undefinable thing, then it is not a spectrum. It is more like a black hole where all sense and reason and the very laws of science break down into nothingness. So what exactly does a man mean when he says, I identify as a woman? What is a woman?
No man says that they identify as a woman. If somebody says that they identify as a woman, then they're a woman. Just because you don't understand it or refuse to understand it doesn't mean it's not true.
Is a woman in the end just anyone who enjoys feminine things or dresses in a feminine way? Well, that...
No. You can be a femboy. You can be a masked woman. You can identify as a man and still enjoy feminine things. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, let's take the concept of manscaping. That's easy. Traditionally speaking, your traditional masculine man is hairy. They have chest hair, back hair, pubic hair, hairy legs, hairy armpits, hairy face. There are men out there who do not like body hair. I'm not a particularly hairy person, but I don't particularly like body hair. I manscape. That's traditionally considered to be a feminine characteristic, to the absence of body hair or to remove your body hair. Women traditionally shave their legs, they shave their armpits, and in modern society, it's traditionally considered to be feminine to shave your pubic hair as well. There are men that do that too. That's a tradition, something that's traditionally considered to be a feminine act that men can partake in. I still have hairy legs. I just manscape certain portions of my body because I don't like body hair. That's considered feminine to do, yet I still identify as a man. It's perfectly possible to do feminine things and still consider yourself a man. And it's perfectly possible to do things that are traditionally considered masculine and still consider yourself a woman. And it's perfectly reasonable to identify as a woman but still be masculine presenting. Just the same as it's perfectly perfectly valid to identify as a woman and do masculine things. And it's possible to identify as male and do feminine things and be born assigned male at birth. Women are allowed to have body hair too. That's what I was saying, honey. It's traditionally considered to be a masculine characteristic to, say, have hairy legs or hairy underarms. It's traditionally considered to be a masculine trait, and it's perfectly valid to do those things and still identify as a woman, and even to be born assigned female at birth and still do those things. It's perfectly valid. It's just he thinks it's icky to do that kind of stuff, regardless of what your gender identity is or what you were assigned at birth. People like this person here believe that if you were born with a big old donger, that you have to be a man and you have to do masculine things, and to deviate from that is degeneracy. And that's fucking wrong.
That can't be it, because we can't define feminine until we have defined the word woman. The definition of feminine is hinged on the definition of woman. Also,
No,
this
it's
definition
not.
would turn a lot of women into non-women and a lot of non-women into women. Besides, the left has been trying to break down these societal constructs of feminine versus masculine for years now. Surely you can't go from not all women should be expected to be feminine to the only defining characteristic of womanhood.
What if it's a small donger? Well, if they identify as a man and they got a tiny little Peter, well, I'm still a man. That's because I'm cis. I identify as a man. But yeah, if you have a small penis and you identify as a man, you're still a man. If you have a small penis and you identify as a woman, you're still a woman.
Is femininity. So what is a woman? They have no answer.
No. You just need to say they have no answer to try and invalidate their arguments and try to reaffirm your reductive worldview, because you refuse to let go of it, because you think that accepting ideologies that you didn't previously identify with somehow makes you less of a person. It's okay to change your opinions when I'm presented with new information. That's what I did. I used to be a right-wing chud, and then I was given new information, and I changed my worldview, and I changed my opinions because of the new information that I was given.
As leftists, though, they are obliged to celebrate the achievements of women, even as they are obliged to also deny the objective existence of women. This is the paradox that we are expected to pretend we don't notice. But we should notice it, because it reveals the basic incoherence of leftist gender ideology.
No, it doesn't.
It's not, see, this is what I want people to understand. It's not just scientifically wrong. It is scientifically wrong.
No, it's
It is
not.
also-
No, it is not scientifically wrong. The scientific consensus supports my worldview, supports my opinions. It doesn't support yours. You have to tell yourself that it does so that you can sleep at night and affirm your worldview. You are wrong.
Logically impossible. What they are, the things that they are asserting and contending make no logical sense. And that's the most important part of this. And because of all of that, they're canceled.
No, we're not. All right, so that was leftist gender ideology is nonsense. That was something. The problem with reviewing these kinds of videos by these right-wing chuds and these reactionaries is as when I'm doing it, I tend to be repeating myself over and over again because they don't really say a whole lot of anything. Yeah, it was nonsense. Thank you. They don't say a whole lot of anything. They just repeat the same talking points over and over and over again, trying to convince you that their way of thinking is right without having to back up their arguments, because there's no way for them to back up their arguments. And you see this in a lot of political ideologies. But yeah, so I might as well throw my tags at the end of this video because it's going up on YouTube. Feel free to follow me at any of my how do I do this? My socials right there. There we go. Follow me on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to subscribe, drop a follow if you're watching on Twitch. But thanks for tuning in.